Good afternoon and welcome to the February 27th meeting of the Policy Management Committee. Before we get started, I'm going to allow my colleagues a moment to introduce themselves. Ms. Wolf. It's Brenda.
You know what I was thinking? I was going to take Sammy's line and say, I'm so happy to be here with you. Brenda Wolf, District 5.
Good afternoon, everyone. Shebra Evans, District 4.
I'm going to go ahead and say my famous line. Sammy Saeed, student member of the board, and I am elated to be here today.
And I'm Rebecca Svondrowski, District 2 and Chair of the committee. With that, why don't we go around the table and let everybody else introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Lori Christina Webb. I'm Chief of Staff for the board.
Good afternoon, Tom Lockman, Deputy Chief of Staff to the board as of yesterday.
Welcome, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you.
Victoria Van Dyke, board staff.
Sally Davis, Supervisor of Policy and Regulations.
Hello. Hi.
Leslie Turner Percival, Legal Director in the Office of General Counsel.
Brian Holt, Chief Operating Officer.
Good afternoon. Stephanie Williams, General Counsel.
Hi. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for joining us today and all of those people tuned in. I will start off by asking if anybody has any questions, comments, concerns about the informational summaries. No? All right, great. Then we're going to keep moving. Today we will be discussing technical amendments to policy DJA, MCPS's Procurement Practice and Bids Award. We will also be discussing a policy that literally everyone that I know of, especially Mr. Saeed here, has an opinion on, and that is the homework policy, IKB. We're just going to discuss policy IOD, Education of English Language Learners. This has been an important topic for the board for a long time now, so I'm looking forward to this conversation. As our population of English language learners continues to grow, we know that there's a much needed urgency to this policy, so thank you. We're going to discuss the public comments on IJA, school counseling programs and services. And finally, we will have a high-level discussion about the human resources policies we will be focused on this year. It's an incredibly important conversation. I know a lot of work's already been put into it, but I know there's a lot of work that will yet to be coming. I look forward to getting started on that. And then, let's see, we are going to be receiving an item of information on the regulations the superintendent issued between September and January of this year. And with that, I will turn it over to the good people who take us where we need to go.
Thank you, Mrs. Svondrowski. Joining us at the table is Mr. Brian Hull, Chief Operating Officer, who will walk you through the presentation on policy DJA. But before he starts, I'd like to give you some background information. In your packets, you will find the final action memo from the Policy Management Committee issued February 12, 2013, for amendments to policy DJA and the rescission of policy DJB. At that time, the two policies were rolled into one. So on the last page of the final action memo, which is in your materials, you will see the 1987 policy DJB that Mr. Hull will be speaking about in a few moments. Also in your materials are the current education article and state finance and procurement article in the Maryland Code, which sets the dollar amount or threshold for purchases above which school systems are required to advertise for bids. And in October 2023, these Maryland state bid laws raised the threshold for bids from $50,000 to $100,000. And the board, through policy DJA, set that threshold for MCPS at $25,000. Our conversation today will address when and how the current $25,000 limit was set, its current implications, and the rationale behind seeking an amendment to policy DJA to raise the threshold to $50,000. Mr. Hull, next slide, please.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon, members of the Board of Education. My name is Brian Hall. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. So today we are here to talk about our purchasing policy, policy DJA. it was actually back in 1987, board policy DJB set the dollar amount for bids and board approval at $25,000. With inflation, that $25,000 today equates to about $68,700. In other words, what you could purchase back in 1987 for $25,000 today costs almost $69,000. In 2013, when board policy DJB was rescinded and folded into board policy DJA, the $25,000 threshold set in 1987 carried over into the new policy unchanged. At that time, adjusted for inflation, the $25,000 equated to about $51,000. So it had already about doubled in that amount of time based on inflation and the Bureau of Statistics. Again, the number was not changed at that point. You'll notice in our request in the draft policy to raise the threshold for formal solicitations and approval by the Board of Education from $25,000 to $50,000, but even this does not keep pace with inflation, nor does it keep pace with changes that have been made at the state level. This last October, the state actually raised their threshold from $50,000 to $100,000. We are not seeking to raise our level to $100,000. We certainly understand the board's desire and need for oversight, but the modest increase from $25,000 to $50,000 would be beneficial for the district in a number of ways. Certainly internally, it will allow our school leaders and our department leaders to be more agile and adjust more quickly to unexpected need or changes in circumstances. It will also benefit us from a competitive perspective. The RFP process can be cumbersome. It takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Oftentimes, with all of the legal hoops to jump through, smaller companies struggle to compete with some of the larger ones. And so eliminating this barrier to entry for these smaller dollar amounts would actually allow for increased competition and, importantly, increased competition with some of our smaller local businesses in the area.
Can you just explain that to me? I don't understand. Like, regardless of what size the company is, if we're putting in a bid request, I'm not sure what our approval has to do with their being able to apply for the.
So the bids would still remain. You would have, or the quotes would still remain. So anytime someone made a purchase of even under $50,000, they would still need to get quotes from multiple different companies. The bigger hurdle is with the RFP, where we're doing a formal solicitation. Again, that takes a significant amount of time, and so in the next several weeks here, we'll be releasing something district-wide, letting departments and schools know that if they have something that they need to purchase for the beginning of next school year, that they need to submit, and this is going to require an RFP, they're going to need to submit that now. So there just is a long runway, and it makes it difficult to maneuver. As far as companies that bid on it, there is a time component to putting in these bids. There is some level of complexity, and so we believe that eliminating that barrier, especially just around some of these smaller dollar amounts in purchases, would increase the number of companies that would be willing to bid and that would be able to bid on different services that we're trying to solicit. So if we can go to the next slide, this kind of addresses the inflationary impacts that I was talking about. So if you go back to 1987 there on the far left, $25,000 was the limit. The top line, the red line, shows how inflation has increased that $25,000. So as I stated earlier, $25,000 back in 1987 is equivalent to almost $70,000 today. And as we all know, especially in recent years with the inflation post-COVID, that is very real. So then the blue line is our purchasing threshold, which has remained at $25,000 over the decades. And then the bottom line there shows, again, what you would be able to purchase today for $25,000 back in 1987. So it's kind of the opposite of the red line. So in other words, the purchasing power that was in 1987 was $25,000. With inflation, today you'd only be able to buy something that costs $9,000. So significantly less. I mean, for $25,000 back in 1987, there were many more things that you could buy. Today, the equivalent would be about $9,000. And so just really trying to adjust to get us kind of caught up with inflation. And we talk about, how inflation impacts our overall funding and our per student funding. It's the same impact here. You just can't buy nearly as much today as you could back in 1987. If we could go to the next slide, please. So some of the other counties in the state, as you can see, most of the large counties already have a threshold of 50,000, and many of them are moving along with the state, either by policy. So you can see there that some of them are pegged to state law. Others we have reached out to directly, and they have shared with us their intention of moving to $100,000. So the other large counties in the state are already at 50, and many or most of them moving along with the state to the 100,000.
Mr. Hull, can I ask you a question? Do you know how long the other counties have been at the 50,000 threshold? Did you ask that question?
I don't have that in front of me. Let me see if anyone on the team.
2017. Okay.
2017.
Thank you.
Yep. And the state increased their threshold in 2013. Up is when they made the change up to 50,000. And then several districts followed shortly after that.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do we maintain a list of already approved vendors that you don't have to put out an RFP for?
For many, many of our services, yes.
So then, talk to me a little bit about the barrier to entry for smaller amounts for smaller businesses. Why can't they get on that already approved vendor list?
They certainly can, and many of them do, but that is far from an all-encompassing list. I mean, it certainly is available for things like, the food we serve, the materials we use every day, bus parts, and those types of things that are reoccurring. But there are, many other situations where it's a one-off or an annual renewal, in which case, the bids have to come in as the RFP or as the purchase is being brought forward.
Okay, I have to tell you this. I hear you, but I've been concerned about women and minorities, and so looking at the RFP process and what comes in as a bid helps me to understand whether or not we're improving our minority and women outreach.
So we do have a program that both encourages that and tracks it, and so that would not change at all. In fact, most everything that we have in place to monitor our procurements, make sure that we are doing business with a variety of different companies, and very importantly, that we are engaging with our women and minority-owned businesses. All of that, continues, along with all of the guidelines and protections that we have in place to make sure that what is being purchased is done, by policy and by law. So none of that changes. It's simply the board approval and then the need to go out for an RFP and go through that extensive process.
But I guess what I hear you, but I guess what concerns me is I'm not seeing improvement. From when I was signing contracts, I just did not see minority representation and women representation, and that's what I would need to see to be convinced that just let you handle it at a certain level by yourself, that somebody is making sure that that's increasing.
So I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I'm going to turn around and see if Ms. McIntosh Davis can speak to that at all.
Because I think what my colleague is trying to say, at some point, I think we want to at least get to a threshold of 25%. And let's say maybe we've been getting to 8 or 13%. I don't have the percent in my head. I don't have it memorized. I should, but maybe we've gone a little bit higher. And how can we, as we change our parameters, just ensure that it doesn't negatively impact minorities, women, and our disabled partners?
Sure. So what I can speak to with regard to the RFP process that's in place, we do have a lot of minority business enterprises that do submit RFPs, but they also are competing against some of the larger companies, so they don't win a lot of the awards for that reason, and it's expensive for them to actually compete in the RFP process. So actually having the availability for them to sort of compete informally, we can receive a proposal from them and enter into a contract with them on more of an informal quote basis up to a particular value, actually helps those smaller minority businesses. But we do, and I'm not sure, Mrs. Wolf, if when you're signing, you were signing the contracts, what information you get with regard to if they are minority or female owned, and that may be something that needs to be put in the documentation when it's submitted, so that you guys are more aware, other than the quarterly report that we, submit on the minority businesses.
I would ask often, and they would go back and check, but that's my big concern, that I need some sort of assurance that we aren't dropping the ball on this, because I personally hadn't seen improvement in it. And of course, I'm not doing that now, so I couldn't say for real that it's no improvement, but that does concern me.
Understood. And I also, I participate at least 3 times a year now with either Montgomery County government or I believe it's the Black Coalition. They host these sort of like a vendor fair, and I participated last Wednesday in an online fair for Montgomery County government, where we Montgomery County Public Schools, Montgomery College, WSSC, and City of Rockville often participate, and we tell these small businesses and minority businesses how to do business with us, how they need to be registered, so that we have they can be contacted directly when we release the solicitations, and that is in the formal sense. In the competed sense, anything over the 25 right now.
I was going to ask that question, because I do know some years back that we started doing that, which seemed to be helpful to a lot of the business owners, and I didn't know we had did it. I think that we started doing it like at least 3 times a year.
Yeah, at least. Montgomery County does 2, I know, a year, usually in the spring and the fall, but the Black Coalition has also come into that area. They were helped by Montgomery County government last year, and now they're doing their own. So, and I think it is, we're participating in that one. I believe it's either April or May.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So the last piece I will just mention is, before we open it up for additional questions, if you remember last year, we were having some issues early in the school year when I first started around some of the contracts and some of the board approval with procurement. So we did kind of a refresh with our procurement department, moved that over to finance, which I think has been very helpful. And then we brought in the Council of the Great City Schools, which is a national organization, and they brought in a team of procurement experts from school districts around the country to look at our processes, our procedures, gave a number of recommendations, one of which was to increase this threshold from $25,000 to $50,000. It will allow for the team to spend more time and more focus on those larger purchases where there is more of an opportunity for something to go wrong if they're not having to, spend the time going through this, labor-intensive RFP process for contracts between 25 and 50,000. And again, the internal audit oversight would continue. Anything under $7,500 would still require 1 quote. Anything between $7,500 and $25,000 would still require 2 quotes. And then anything between $25,000 and $49,999 would require 3 quotes. And then at the $50,000 would trigger the formal solicitation.
I don't see that in the policy, though.
That would be updated with our internal guidelines. I don't think that that's in the current policy either.
Okay.
But that would be something that we would have in place and certainly could share with the board.
Maybe something that we want to consider adding to the policy. Yeah. Okay, did my colleagues have any other questions? We're not taking a vote on whether or not to change the number now. It's just a question of, do we want to push this on to the full board? So if nobody has anything else, I'll say all in favor of sending it to the full board.
Sure.
Just for discussion. Okay, so we will send this to the full board for you to give them, all of us, the discussion, and any other additional information or anything that comes up between now and then would be great. And we can go from there.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, let's see, where's my agenda? Okay, so next item of business is the discussion of policy IKB homework, where we should potentially be taking some tentative action on that one.
Thank you. Joining us now are members of the writing team redeveloping policy IKB homework. When we first talked to you about this policy last spring, we set out a framework of key questions to research and discuss with stakeholders. Today, we are bringing a first draft for your review. Our presenters today will talk about their research, and then we'll walk you through the new draft at that time. I'll invite each of you to introduce yourselves as you begin, and let's turn first to Ms. Brandt.
Good afternoon, members of the Board of Education. My name is Stephanie Brandt, and I'm the Director of Pre-K-12 Curriculum, Operations, and Support in the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Programs. I'm joined today by Nico D'Orazio, an apprentice in the Department of College and Career Readiness and district-wide programs. He's the first apprentice in central office and has been invaluable to this work because of his connection with our students. We are here together because we recognize the importance of updating policies as well as serving and responding to our community well. Today we're going to give you an overview of the process of revising policy IKB as well as what has changed within the policy. But first, we want you to better understand the process. There are a few key takeaways from the information we shared today, but it's important to know that we strategically planned for this review to include students, staff, community members, research, and benchmarking. When we first started this policy revision, there were many findings within the anti-racist audit results that made us consider what we could do differently. The questions that you see on this slide, next slide please, were introduced from the beginning of this process and used as our compass to keep us grounded in the results of those findings and applied to all stakeholder input, as well as research and benchmarking. What is the purpose of homework in elementary, middle, and high school? What homework practices are most impactful on student outcomes? How does homework impact historically marginalized communities? And what are the responsibilities of the district and schools in determining homework practices? I now turn it over to Nico to share the most important part of this revision, the extensive outreach to our students. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Ms. Brandt. I'm Nico D'Orazio, an Education Policy Apprentice in the MCPS Department of College and Career Readiness and District-Wide Programs. As Ms. Brandt said, student feedback was extremely important in the process of reviewing policy IKB. When reviewing our student feedback, we want to ensure that it was both an equitable and inclusive process. And knowing that students across the county experience homework differently, we conducted a geographical analysis on where we wanted to hold our focus groups. In fact, we actually took out a large map of MCPS schools, and we pinpointed where we wanted to have our focus groups based on location and demographics. Doing this, we reached the DCC, the NEC, the Mid-County, and the Up-County, holding 13 focus groups as south as Pinecrest Elementary and as north as John Poole Middle to ensure that we truly hit every part of the county. Further, we held focus groups in a variety of summer school classes to ensure that the feedback we received reflected the learning needs of students throughout the school year. And in order to provide level-appropriate engagement with students, our focus groups for elementary school were structured differently with simplified content than secondary school focus groups. And I'd really like to set the stage for you on how we did that. One of the classes that comes closest to mind is the 4th grade ELA and math class at Germantown Elementary. We started off with a game of this or that, and we brought all the students to the front and asked them different questions, such as whether or not they preferred math or reading homework, practice or new learning, creating something or writing about something. And we watched as they moved from one side of the classroom to the other, explaining their decision and telling us enthusiastically why they preferred creating something over writing something, or practice over new learning. Then we transitioned to table groups, and we asked the students what kind of homework they think can help, and what kinds of homework that they don't like. And something that really struck me within conversations we had was about reading homework. And some of the students didn't like reading homework quite as much as they did before, because there were tricky words within the reading homework that they couldn't understand. And the reason that they didn't like their reading homework as much as before is because when they would go home and read their homework and face these tricky words, their parents didn't speak English, and so they couldn't receive help on those tricky words and understand their reading. And they would come to class the next day confused, and there wouldn't be time for them to ask for help or receive any feedback on what they hadn't understood, and they would feel left behind. And that really stuck with me because it reinforced the purpose of homework review and ensuring that homework can be completed at home by all students. On the other hand, our focus groups with students in secondary school were much more in depth. One of the first groups that we held was at a Wheeling High School technology education class full of students from 10th through 12th grade. First, we took all the students and we split them up into table groups to discuss the meaning of a policy and the 4 key questions that guided our review of this policy. After doing that, we jumped into questions about current homework practices. We discussed best practices, those to avoid, and what students would change about homework to help them best learn. And although many of the students spoke Spanish, our materials were translated, and I'm also multilingual, so we were able to sit with each group and understand what they truly had to say about each of the questions we asked them. And the students were adamant that homework should be for practice and be based off of what was learned in class because it helped them review for tests and it helped them raise their grade if they did their homework. Next slide, please. And so as you can tell, the conversations we held with students were very substantive. And I know a lot of people would expect that students would just say that they don't want any homework and they hate homework, but that's not what happened. Students really had a lot of amazing feedback to say about homework review. And we included the following 3 quotes to reflect that. When asked about best practices, a 7th grader from Briggs Cheney Middle School suggested that allowing homework completion or helpful advice during class helped her. And she said this because it allowed her to learn from her mistakes and receive feedback on what she didn't understand, and she was also able to understand the content more in depth. And that relates back to what we saw both in Germantown Elementary and in Wheeling High School, and in most of the groups that we held. It also allowed her to go home and redo the homework because she now knew the right way to complete it. When asked about practices to avoid, a 10th grader from Seneca Valley High School said that having homework on material they haven't yet learned is detrimental to their learning. And this was because the student would go home and they wouldn't know what to do. They wouldn't know how to complete their homework and they would be left confused. And they felt that they would learn better if the homework was based on what had been learned in class, so they could take that learning, go home, and apply it to their homework. And this is a really important quote because it highlights one of the root causes of learning disparities that we uncovered throughout the process. We could conclude that when students didn't have supports at home or time to go back in class and ask questions, they were left behind on their homework and they would fall behind and not meet course objectives. And finally, when asked for suggestions for teachers, a 10th grader at Wheeling High School said that he suggests that teachers take the homework they assign seriously. And I really think that this reflects the sentiment of students when they receive a lot of homework and it's not reviewed and it's not reflected on. And it shows that students still consider homework as practical supports and as purposeful to their learning and not just as something else they have to do when they get home. And I really think that this segues into our general trends that we found. Now, we've highlighted 3 general trends for you under our general trends section. And primarily we found that homework for practice held much more value for students, particularly when it was aligned with course objectives and assigned in appropriate amounts. It helped students prepare for their tests and it reinforced material that they had already learned. Students could also use past course material to support their completion of homework that night, being able to connect past course objectives to the current ones that they're learning. And also, when assigning appropriate amounts, homework still reinforced learning objectives without taking time away from home, which was a big barrier that we saw within our focus groups. Next, elementary students were placed at a disadvantage when they did not have support at home to complete their homework. And we saw this throughout many of our focus groups, including the one with the fourth graders at Germantown Elementary. Students would describe falling behind when their parents or guardians couldn't help them with their homework, and when prior learning wasn't reinforced at home nor in class the next day, students would be left confused and fall behind. Students also reported that simple supports like homework helpers that guide them to their answers drastically improve their comprehension and retention of a topic because they were able to learn the right way to do it after they had made a mistake. And this leads me to our next and final trend. When teachers reviewed homework in class, student understanding of course content greatly increased. Students were able to reflect on content that they couldn't complete, ask questions, and receive meaningful feedback on what they didn't understand. And they were able to reflect on those mistakes. Students could then see the purpose of their prior learning because the feedback they received could segue into that day's lesson and allow them to connect prior learning to the learning that they're having that day. And lastly, teachers could use homework feedback to gauge the learning objective achievement of their courses and modify their lesson plans accordingly. I now turn it back to Ms. Brandt to discuss further stakeholder engagement and research. Thank you.
Next slide, please. During the revision process, we presented to and gathered input from a variety of different stakeholder groups. We structured them in a way to elicit authentic conversations to identify trends and patterns within those groups. The groups included student action achievement groups, staff to include employee associations, school leadership teams, as well as MCPS executive leadership, community groups to include multi-stakeholder groups such as our Curriculum Advisory Assembly. Lastly, we analyzed peer-reviewed research journals for latest findings on the homework, efficacy, and best practices. Our research findings supported that student assignments completed at home require a personal level of maturity for students to work independently. We also found that research indicates that homework for elementary school-age students is of lower priority than other developmental tasks that occur outside of school setting. For secondary school-age students, we found that working independently at home has been shown to have value when purposefully designed to reinforce skills. We also benchmark comparable school districts. As you review the three charts, you'll notice the alignment and thinking that contributed to this revision. The findings have informed the draft we've brought today. Next slide, please. On this next slide, you will notice the trends and patterns that emerged from our conversations. Those include feedback on homework is important. It impacts students' engagement and motivation. Assignments requiring parental support impact the disparity we see, especially with elementary school-age students. It is less important for a policy to set the number of assignments and more important for homework to have value. I now turn it over to Sally Davis to review the revisions to policy IKB.
Thank you. Right. So thank you. And I will defer to your interest in me to walk through it piece by piece, but I'm happy to do that.
I mean, it's being,
Yeah,
new.
I would.
It's-
Okay, sure. All right, so I'd like to draw your attention first on page 1 to the reworked purpose section and how this nuances the previous blanket statement that homework just generally has value. So without taking into consideration best practices, curricular objectives, and students' ages. You'll notice on lines 28 to 43, the nuance about maturity level. And then the position statement starting on page 2 makes the linkages back to the board's existing commitments in grading reporting, non-discrimination, equity, and cultural proficiency, and family-school partnerships. Because we're trying to make those linkages of homework being a fair and meaningful representation of the student's work. That's the priority from grading and reporting. That homework practices will be critically examined to develop alternatives to practices that may present barriers, and so on. So those are the linkages to your existing policy statements. If I can take you to page 4, just briefly, starting at line 98, about the amount and timing of homework being age appropriate. You'll also notice at line 118, a reflection of board priorities about student well-being and the timing of homework in relationship to religious celebrations and events. If I can take you over to page 7, to the implementation strategies, where we reference the professional homework practices in alignment with best practices. And let me see. Right. I'm off by a page, sorry. Page 8 applies a root cause analysis to non-completion of homework that can take into account and provide for reteaching, coaching, other supports students may need to complete assignments, individual learner needs or concerns that should be communicated to school well-being teams or educational management teams, and the environments available to students that are conducive to study and access to and the functionality of required technology and other supporting resources. And we're ready for your comments and discussion.
So before I let my colleagues jump in here, could you, on page 3, line 57 through 60, I don't understand that sentence, that section. Homework practices should be critically examined to identify and develop alternatives to practices that may present barriers to students' participation in the MCPS educational program. Can you explain to me what that means?
Well, I'll start it, and then maybe Ms. Brandt and Mr. D'Orazio can jump in. We're thinking about some of the things that were highlighted, especially in the anti-racist audit, about things that we have always done because we've always done them, but we really should look at them and make sure that they are effective for all students. So when we're thinking of things that require, for example, some of the things they have cited here, a high degree of either independence or a high degree of family participation in the homework, we need to look at whether that is really in line with the assignment, in line with what is possible for that family. Anything else you want to add to that?
I understand it a lot better. I was reading it from a different perspective, so. So, Ms. Evans.
Sure. I was going to first thank Ms. Bryan and Mr. D'Orazio for their presentation. I love that we have an apprentice. Right?
Exactly.
I love how you went into the classroom and you had focus groups with the kids, and it was age-appropriate discussion, but you got some good information back from it. And so I just wanted to make sure that I wanted to ask a question, and it was kind of on the same page as Ms. Madrowski just mentioned, page 3, line 69, where, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't overthinking this, where we have assistive technology listed, and I know that parents and possibly teachers might think of different things in terms of assistive technology, and I wanted to know if we could just kind of give a few examples of assistive technology, but not limit it to whatever examples that we use, just so people can have a clear understanding. Like, I'll give you an example. Maybe a student in the classroom might need to use a recorder, but that might not be the thing that we're thinking that is current for students to be able to do. But I just want us to give examples and not have it limited so that there's an understanding from everybody as to what devices could be used for assistive technology.
I'm going to be cautious in responding because this language was requested by some of our 504 specialists who are not at the table. So I would appreciate the opportunity to get back to you.
Sure, can you? Okay, just to see.
Mr. Saeed?
Yes. Again, fantastic presentation. I think a lot of what has been done with this policy has been clearly very intentional. And from, what I've heard from students, very aligned with that, and so, I really do appreciate that. And I think a lot of these changes are fantastic. Recently, I believe a couple months ago, I hosted a SMOB advisory council meeting about a number of policies, and the homework policy was one of them. And I actually had, people in my organization go over the policy with students and see some recommendations. And so I took some of those recommendations I got and I looked over the policy. And with that, I came up with a few things that, I would want to amend, some of them being kind of smaller, and some of those areas maybe I can ask you guys to explore. And so I think, my first thing was on line 74. In that area, it is in relation to the position on homework, which says homework shall align with the board's commitment to the academic, social, emotional, and physical development of students. And then, on that last bullet, it says work assigned outside of the school day. This is line 74, that last line. So work assigned outside of the school day is going to be designed and assigned in consideration of other components of student well-being. And I thought that was really, really important. And something that I heard from the meeting was a lot of students were really focused when they say well-being, things like extracurricular activities, things like family commitments. And I think it'd be good to actually clarify that in the policy, because when you say well-being, it's a little bit vague. And I heard repeatedly that students were saying, if I'm part of like a club or a sport or something, we want to make sure that homework is, in alignment, generally with that as a part of well-being, because if you have to do those commitments, it's harder. So I would say maybe focusing more on that, my general suggestion was to include the same wording and say components of student well-being such as extracurricular activities or family commitments. Now, I don't know if that's something that we can just, if it's so small, can we just vote to add that now, or would we bring it back? I don't know how the process works.
Well, because this is the first round.
We can just tell them.
Yeah,
and then
they will
can,
add it in, and then when it goes to the full board, it'll be
Oh, and then it'll be re-examined. Okay, so that was my first thing. Okay, great. Now I understand how it works. And then a big thing that I was looking at too, on line 81, this is the first opening of the purposeful design of homework. And on line 81, it states rigorous instruction challenges students intellectually, encourages students to question their assumptions, et cetera, et cetera. So something that was noted early in the presentation as one of the key takeaways was that the value of homework to the student and the teacher was more important than when the homework was assigned and the frequency was assigned. And this line here, at the bottom, at line 84, it actually has to clarify what they mean by the word rigorous. It says, rigor shall not be confused with the quantity of homework. Now, what I thought of that is when you think of the word rigorous, you really do think of, in terms of homework at least, quantity, how exhaustive it is, how difficult. So my suggestion, at least generally, to align with what was said earlier in the presentation, would instead of saying rigorous instruction, would be meaningful instruction. That way, the homework isn't just added just to have it, but it's actually meaningful to the instruction that students are learning. Because I know in a lot of my classes, a big reason students do not complete homework is because they don't understand the value of it, right? And so if we can focus more on making, as students keep saying, meaningful homework that's in alignment with instruction, I think that will, just make more sense generally in assigning homework, and will actually increase the number of students who are completing homework. And then I'm kind of just moving through a lot of things. And this is, again, all in alignment with what I heard students tell me, not just at that SMOB Advisory Council meeting, but because we all know homework is a big consideration for students, so what I've heard through the whole year. Then if we can move to line 96. This is in relation to how teachers shall design homework. On line 96, it says homework complements classroom learning. That, this is not really a big thing for me, but I would like to see enhances classroom learning in a way that homework isn't just something that is kind of because I think we want to ensure that obviously homework has to do with the instruction that is going on, and that's going to be a key thing, but complements in a way kind of suggests that homework is just, to some students in a way, like an unnecessary, thing that we're just, reviewing. But I think enhances is a way that reviewing actually ensures students have a better understanding of the content. And so I think instead of saying complements is kind of, oh, homework is this side piece that we're just throwing on there, enhances is homework is a necessary part of instruction. And I think that reiterates that a little bit better, at least in my view. And then the last couple things here, this is going to be way down the list now. This is going to be after line 207, so in this area, so I'll just give you guys a second to get there. I know I skipped through a bunch here. This is about the way that schools shall apply a root cause analysis of patterns of chronic homework non-completion that considers the following. This is really important to me, right? A lot of students don't do their homework. I mean, this is a fact. And I've always, been really active with talking to students on why don't you do homework? Why is it not important? I'm a student. There have been homework assignments that I haven't done. I'm going to be honest, and there are reasons for that. Not to, raise alarms or anything, but there are reasons. And I think the reasons identified here are fantastic. But I think there was a couple that I would like explored. One of them would be the unique circumstances individual students may face, whether it be related to education or not. So this is basically in alignment with, personal commitments and extracurriculars identified before, but just reiterating that. Why don't students do homework? And when you're analyzing why students may not do homework, I think adding in specifically, maybe there are student circumstances that the student has to face that causes them to be unable to complete it. And then I think another really, really important thing, and this is what I've been saying for years now, is when we're looking at why students don't complete homework, we should also assess the value of the homework being assigned in relation to effective classroom instruction and learning for students. So we shouldn't, just assume that the homework is great and then we have to see why students aren't doing it. We should look at the homework itself. What is the actual value of what we're assigning? If we're seeing in a math class that they just keep throwing do 50 problems, more of this, 100 more problems, because I've had assignments like that where it's just sheets and sheets of doing the same thing. What is the value, right, of the homework? Maybe students aren't doing it because they don't actually see that the homework is valuable. This is something I heard a lot in my SMOB Advisory Council meeting, this inexperience I had. If students don't feel like the homework is necessary and they can ace the tests either way, they're not gonna do it. And so I think when we look at root cause analysis patterns of why students don't do homework, we definitely need to analyze what the value of that homework in enhancing that instruction is. And then my final change, I know this was a lot. I think I kind of went back here. So it's going to be line 123 after that. So I'm going to give you all a second to move back up as I do. This is in relation to how teachers shall design homework. I want to add one more area here that I think is important, which was also noted as one of the key areas, which is students, whenever feasible, should have the opportunity to complete homework assignments during classroom instructional time. This was something I know that was identified as actually one of the quotes that was up there from a student, and I hear it all the time. And I'm in classes now, for example, where we have homework that we're allowed to complete in class. That is unbelievably helpful. And the best reason is when you can complete in class, you can go ask questions to the teacher right then and there. And actually, more students do the homework assignment when you have time in class to do it. Because if they have a sport or something that makes them unable to do it that night, they can finish the assignment in class, ask the teacher questions right there, learn what they have to, and it'll increase the amount of students doing their homework, it'll increase the learning, and obviously we don't want to say, oh, always try and give them opportunities in class, but whenever it's feasible. If you have extra instruction, maybe give students that opportunity to do the homework. It'll help increase achievement for students, learning and instruction. So I think that's something that we should definitely explore. And very long list of things, but that's going to conclude the things that I noticed. And again, these are all in relation to what I've heard students say and what they directly said to me during my advisory council meeting.
I was just, I want to thank you for your enthusiasm,
Yes.
recommendations and thoughts on this. Clearly, you've been thinking about it a lot.
Yeah.
And had a lot of conversations with it. I do think that much of what you've mentioned is kind of in here. One of the things that you mentioned about was really looking at whether or not the homework is important. I feel like that's actually in here a couple of times.
Okay.
If it's meaningful and if it's participating in class. Trying to think of some of the other things that you mentioned. When you mentioned about the line of teachers shall coordinate homework assignments when feasible with other teachers, you want added to and be able to participate? Because that's suggesting that each student doesn't have homework in every single class necessarily, or so if two teachers are kind of doing the same type of lesson, they could coordinate.
Sorry, I think I wasn't clear. I want to add that as a separate bullet below that. So I just put the line so we can navigate there, but that would be its own thing. I didn't mean to add it to that line specifically. That would be like a new bullet in that section.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't clear
No, that's
about
okay. Like I said, there was some other things that it was a lot, and I very love your thoughts. I just want to make sure that they have a chance to kind of go through and determine what's already in here
Agreed.
versus what needs to be added. if that's okay.
Agreed. Yeah, and I forgot to even say it, but 100% I meant to say that exactly, which is this was just me kind of going through and just looking at some areas. Of course, like you said, that the one you noted, which is about the meaningfulness of homework, if it's already in there, that's not a big thing. I just wanted to make sure that those things were reiterated. But again, if it's already, I know it is outlined in the policy, that's not a big thing, but I just wanted to consider it. I appreciate that.
They're
though,
good
as well.
comments, and they're good,
Yeah.
they're, like I said, it's very thoughtful feedback, so I appreciate it. Ms. Evans, do you have something before I?
Yeah, I think it was similar to what Mrs. Smodowski said, that I was gonna say, can we get that long list?
Oh, yeah.
And then I think that, and I wanted to insert, and he's not here, Arvin Kim's voice in here, because he was on our policy committee when we started with the homework policy, and he said what you said in terms of, we want the homework to add value, right? And I just thought that was worth reiterating. But I want your list, because I think there was one thing I was going to push back on you on in terms of, I don't know how the teacher can ascertain what students are in what programs outside of the school day, because as a mother of a student athlete and a graduate of MCPS, I was a student athlete, the one thing that I always say to them, academics comes first, right? And so we're going to do these things outside of class. Then you have to figure out how to get your work done, and it's important to keep your grades up. So I do think that while that is a great thing to be considered of our students, that we have to also teach them balance, right? So if you want to do this thing, then how do you figure out how to incorporate like another activity into your schedule and time management, right? But I'm not saying to give them homework just to give them homework. I appreciate that we did this homework policy and that you all came back with the feedback that you did. And I thought it was really interesting. I don't know if you pointed out the part about asking the teachers that they don't actually use the homework to assess where the students are, right? So we do know that, but I thought it was powerful to say that you did not hear that feedback from the teachers when you were doing the review. So I just wanted to say we need your long list, and you always add value to the conversation, but I did want to pause on the portion where we're trying to dictate homework based on what your extracurricular activities are, okay?
I just wanted to thank you, Nico. Great job.
Yes.
And I see that Dartmouth water bottle. But I do have one question. Could you talk to me a little bit about what the research says? The second bullet, homework for elementary school-age students is of lower priority than other developmental tasks that occur outside of the school setting. Can you tell me what that means to you?
Yeah, so are you referencing the general trends on the, regarding what we've heard from student feedback?
It's under what the research says.
Slide 5.
Slide 5,
Like 5?
the second bullet, the second arrow.
Second section,
Arrow.
the middle.
Okay.
Purpose of homework, what the research says. It's the second one.
Yeah, absolutely. I can start us off. And so we found that homework for elementary age students, when they would go home, one of the largest aspects of homework, one of the largest areas of homework that would be beneficial for them is reading homework. And so that, that is something where after rote memories, after doing it multiple times, you're learning that skill, you're learning how to read. But on the other hand, with math homework or other homeworks where there aren't quite as many supports, it's not as helpful as going out and having hands-on experiences and applying what you've learned in class. Say you learn about, say you're having a science lesson on photosynthesis or whatever it may be. I know that was part of the 4th and 5th grade curriculum. Going outside and being able to see the leaves, being able to see, how that's, being influenced within your daily life is a lot more beneficial for a student within that age group, within that elementary school age group, rather than say, staying home all night and doing math homework, doing science homework, doing readings, rather being able to apply that hands-on. Now, when you're in a high school or a middle school setting, you're able to have that kind of balance as, a more mature student, to be able to have that homework, have that reading, and have the knowledge of what's going on in your outside area or whatever it might be, and able to apply that within yourself. But for elementary students, it's much more beneficial that they're able to take their learning from school and go out into the real world with their parents, with their brothers, with their sisters, with their siblings, and apply that with their knowledge and with what they're seeing.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was thinking of the example of the kids who go home and cook with their parents and do the math through measurements and things like that, as opposed to sitting and doing a math worksheet, so. Right? So I had a couple of things. On line, so I guess it's page 5, line 118E. One of the things that we've talked about, you know, I've been on the board a long time now, and one of the things that has come up over and over and over again, usually through a different route, but is homework and assignments and things like that on religious holidays that we as a system are not celebrating. We always tell our students, it's an excused absence if it's a religious holiday for you, and we're not observing it at the school level. But then the kids will always say, but then I have homework to make up. And so I would like to see incorporated in here somewhere that, because years ago, as a board, we had said we would eliminate that. I think you were on the board by then. And remove that. So I would like to see that put in here somewhere in policy specifically, so that there's not an expectation that if you miss school because you're home for a religious holiday, that you have twice as much homework to do the next day or that week or whatever. My other kind of concern was on page 6 at number 4, line 158. There's a lot of conversation that goes on around when homework's due and what, does it have to be turned in by a specific time? Does it have to be counted or considered? Can someone just at the end of the school year turn in a bunch of assignments or do extra work to boost their grades and things like that? I'd like to see that somewhat addressed a little bit more. I don't know how to address it. I'm just saying that I think there's a lot of differentiation between teachers and schools and whatever, and I would just like to see a little bit more clarity in reference to that kind of thing. And I think that might have been the big things. Yep, those were the two big things that, for me. I know you all said it. I know all my colleagues said it. I think we all believe it. If homework isn't getting checked, if you can, my daughter used to, she'd be so proud I'm sharing this, but, so grades were very important to her. So if she didn't have time to do something, she'd just put something down because the teachers would just go and look and see that there was writing on the paper, and it didn't matter what it said. So that's not actually effective learning, in my opinion. And so making sure that we are, and I know, like I said, I know it was discussed and addressed. I'm just trying to worry about pinpointing specifics that if we are assigning homework, that it be valued by the teacher enough to go over. If you do a math worksheet and you've got 60% of the answers wrong and you don't know it, it doesn't matter that you did the homework because you did it wrong and you didn't learn anything from it. So if that's something that needs to be a little bit more specified, I don't know, or if you have it in here and I'm just kind of missing it, that's fine too. But those were my thoughts that I wanted to share.
Yeah, I'd actually love to take a shot at that. I'll say as a student, I've also had that kind of experience where, maybe due to well-being concerns or due to, something after school and extracurricular, say having a sport or having to go to a, say, student government meeting, I haven't been able to have time to do my homework in the full way. I'll do the same thing. I'll scribble something down and call it a day. And I think that's when being able to go to class the next day and knowing that your teacher is going to put the answers up on the board and walk you through how to do it, which is what this policy would outline, is what is beneficial for students. It would take into the concerns of, well-being without having to necessarily go into whether, what specifically is going on after school. It's just saying that teachers should be knowledgeable about that, and their feedback and their review on your homework is going to be able to benefit your learning, and that way. Whether or not you're able to complete it in the right way, maybe you do go to class without homework completed, but you're seeing how it's being done, and you can go back home the next day and know how to do it. I think that's what is so really great about this policy and about the student feedback that we did, because it includes that and it encompasses that.
So I agree about the student feedback part. I just want to make sure that it's clear enough in the policy to recognize that that's what we were trying to say. Yeah, I mean, that was part of when we went through the whole conversation about final exams. Part of the reason we said maybe we needed to avoid that particular process because you get the answers in the summertime. Your class is over. It didn't add any real value other than the studying aspect. So I just want us to be mindful of those things. Anybody have anything else that they wanted to add or share? Mm-hmm.
Another shout out to Nico, who
yes, agreed.
is just so fantastic. I work with him on my SMOB advisory council, and we always talk about things like this, and I see all the good work that you do, and I see pictures of you at these schools and everything. So I just want to highlight how fantastic it is to have apprentices like you, and how fantastic the program of having that is to give great students an opportunity to really create change in MCPS. So I want to thank you once again, Nico, for being here and that fantastic presentation as well. I know it's not easy being on that side of the table, so thank you so much.
So can I get a suggestion? How are we proceeding here? Are you going to take this conversation back, bring something back to us, or should I be recommending we move it to the full board?
We are trying to be mindful that a senior is at the table and
Yes.
would love to see his project get across the finish
100%.
this school year. So we'd like to keep it moving if we could.
Okay,
If we could make your changes and bring it to tentative action, it would keep it moving.
I'm fine with that? Okay. I just wanted to make sure you were good with it. That's what I assumed we were going to do. But, all right, so all in favor of moving this policy, IKB, homework, to the full board? Okay, that's unanimous. Great. Another one down. And we just keep on moving. All right, so coming up next, item number 5 is the policy IOD, Education on English Language Learners. And with that, I will let you all take it away.
Thank you. Joining us at the table to talk about policy IOD is Mr. Jared Velasquez of the Department of English Learners and Multilingual Education. You may recall that the Policy Management Committee received a briefing at the May 2023 meeting at which staff presented a framework for the revisions needed based on important changes in the field of multilingual education. Now, in a minute, Mr. Velasquez will speak a little more about guidance from the state level, as well as the findings from the MCPS specific evaluations and research. Today, we are here to discuss the first draft and request the committee's consideration to move it to the full board for tentative action. Mr. Velasquez.
Hola, members, committee members. My name is, again, Jared Velasquez, and I am the Elementary ELD Supervisor in the Department of English Learners and Multilingual Education. Policy IOD, Education of English Learners, was last revised in 2011. State and federal legislation use the term English language learner. In alignment with guidance from the Federal Department of Education, the Maryland State Department of Education's Blueprint for Maryland, the Cal Report, and current research, the revised policy recasts the deficit orientation of viewing students as only being deficient in English language proficiency to an asset orientation that views students as becoming multilingual. This is why you'll find references to students as emergent multilingual learners, or EMLs. Multilingualism is an asset, and promoting an asset-based approach highlights the strengths of our EMLs. This approach recognizes the diversity, the cultural perspectives, and the individual traits. They're positive assets that contribute and enrich the tapestry of our schools and our system. And so as a result, this policy revision will allow for MCPS to shift the way we speak about the growing population, our students receiving English language development services. While this policy revision focuses a lot on changing the terminology, of how we describe our students and program, it also points to a shift in how we think about and prioritize our emergent multilingual learners as we go about providing them services and acknowledging the academic achievement of our multilingual learners. It is a collective responsibility shared among students, educators, families, and the entire community. And so this includes maintaining consistent and frequent, meaningful two-way communication to ensure that our parents, guardians of our EMLs are well informed about crucial educational information. An example of this, of an implementation of this, is the Remind app, where school staff, central office, students, and parents all have Remind accounts to enable them to send or receive messages using their preferred method of communication, such as text, email, phone call, in their preferred language. Changing our language is a big part of shifting the mindset. Shifting the mindset to this shared responsibility, to ensuring that we have a well-rounded, high-quality instructional program for our EMLs, as it has been identified in MCPS's anti-racist audits, Cal reports, and really the research and best practices says this as well. Language should not, and I'll say this again, language should not serve as a barrier from preventing our emergent multilingual learners from accessing high-quality instructional opportunities. And shifting the language to an asset-based approach involves emphasizing the strengths and capabilities that these students bring, as we like to call them, linguistically gifted students, or as we're recommending in this policy, EMLs, emergent multilingual learners. Instruction should facilitate students in acquiring English swiftly, concurrently, ensuring they stay on par with their grade level peers in content areas. This includes targeted language support, differentiated instruction, and ongoing analysis to tailor the learning experiences of our emergent multilingual learners. It also means staff planning and talking about leveraging the strengths and domains of language to provide them access and opportunity to the grade level curriculum. MCPS's emergent multilingual learners are a diverse group of students representing many countries and languages. And our journey in shifting towards an asset-based approach is in part informed by several lessons learned, which were previously shared here. From the MCPS anti-racist audit, we heard, for example, the importance of all students being prepared to access rigorous curriculum. From the Cal report, regarding all stakeholders and educators in MCPS must take shared responsibility in supporting the engagement and learning of our students and the academic success of our emergent multilingual learners so that they are college and career ready. And additionally, we've heard from the research that we must ensure that we are disrupting the status quo so that EMLs can develop the knowledge, skills, and competencies needed to be ready for the academic and linguistic demands of the 21st century as global citizens. We've already begun the research around this. There has been information and trainings regarding the shift in the work on this language. We have also had meetings with our curricular advisory committee, receiving feedback and informing them of the possible language revisions you're hearing about today. It is essential to appreciate the multilingualism of our emerging multilingual learners, along with recognizing the linguistic and cultural assets that they bring both to the classroom and the broader school community. We must promote an educational landscape that recognizes and maximizes the potential of linguistic diversity, and this policy does just that. And now I'll turn it over to Sally.
Thank you, Mr. Velasquez, and I'll just hop through a few places where you'll see where some of the ideas that Mr. Velasquez presented are located. So as you'll notice in the very beginning, the asset-based framework on page 1, page 2 and 3, Mr. Velasquez has already highlighted the state and federal requirements that MCPS must, with which MCPS must comply. On page 3, if I can take you to line 59, about holding emergent multilingual learners to the same high expectations of learning established for all students. Line 67, that same page. As Mr. Velasquez explains, draw on any assets EMLs may have as listeners, speakers, writers, and readers to build proficiency in other domains. Line 70 states the expectation that EMLs must not just reach, but meet and exceed standards the same as all students. I'm going to hop over to page 6, and at line 156, this is consistent with the board's recently amended policy ABC, Family School Partnerships, that MCPS will provide parents and guardians of EMLs opportunities to learn about critical educational benchmarks, course sequences, service learning timelines, and requirements and application processes required for their students to access rigorous instruction and educational opportunities. Finally, page 9, line 238, that desired outcomes, that not only will language not be a barrier, but page 10, MCPS shall value multilingualism and literacy in other languages and the assets these bring to classrooms and school communities. And with that, we are ready for your discussion.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions, just for clarification. On line 78 to 80, it says provide appropriate instruction to emergent multilingual learners regardless of their previous education, cognitive abilities. I just want to stop right there and try to understand, don't we have to meet them where they are to start with? And if you don't take into consideration their cognitive abilities, are you then able to differentiate instruction to meet their needs? If you understand what I'm asking you.
Yes. And what I think that is stating is that we have to look at who our emergent multilingual learner is, what is their previous education, what are their cognitive abilities, and how do we use that information for instruction? How do we differentiate? How do we look at what they bring as an asset to provide them access to the curriculum?
I agree, but that to me is not what this says. So maybe you want to take a look at that again.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of rewording putting the appropriate instruction after the regardless aspect of it.
Perhaps taking out the word regardless.
Well, that's what I was thinking, but being mindful of, yeah. More?
Oh, no, sorry, thank you.
Either of you guys? Okay, well, I want to thank you very much. I know that, our colleagues have a lot, have been very thoughtful on this as well, and so we will move it to make a motion to move to the full board so we can continue on the process of this. Thank you so much for your, not just your presentation, which was really, really good, by the way, but for the work that you're doing on this and making sure that our students are appropriately represented and that their voice is being made very clear, so thank you. With that, I will move this policy to IOD to the full board. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I forgot it was me again. I was like, wow, it's really quiet in here. Okay, so let's see. Right now we are up to number 6, policy IJA, school counseling programs and services. And at this point, we have reviewed, sent to the full board, put out for public comment, reviewed, and sent back to the committee. So hopefully this will be an opportunity to take some final action. If you want to go ahead and talk to us a little bit about the tremendous amount of public comments that we received on this topic and what kind of effects it had on the work that you're doing.
Well, I will lead off by introducing those that have joined us at the table, Dr. Connolly Chester and Mrs. Shauna K. Duranby. We will be discussing the comments received during the public comment period, and they are here to respond to any questions you may have after we've discussed the response to those the changes that we've made in response to the comments. Dr. Chester?
I think it bounces to me at this point, yeah. Okay, yeah. All right, thank you. So staff have been seeking public comment through a variety of means since April 26th, 2023. During that time, 18 outreach events have been through text, email, publications, meetings, attending professional learning communities with staff, reaching out to a student member of the board. The staff bulletin alone reaches 25,000 staff. Memos to principals were sent asking them to communicate with their school communities with language for processing that. So we also, the staff also conducted conversations during the Mental Health Awareness Week that provided opportunities to talk in person with over 100 people, as well as students who watched via YouTube. So in your materials is a summary of engagement activities. It was quite robust. 122 comments were received through the public comment site. There were also additional questionnaires administered by staff during some of these events that were in a more conversational format. Let's see. 9 commenters noted that MCPS should maintain a focus on academics, not therapy. Commenters provided feedback on staffing levels and the importance of parents. I'm going to address some more of these comments to show you where we made made a number of changes, and we did make a number of changes in the policy. So if I can take you to just the beginning, in response to some of the comments that asked for a focus on the educational mission and how these services align, we did kind of make that language a little more prominent, that these kinds of services support the essential educational mission of Montgomery County Public Schools, specifically, student learning, academic achievement, school attendance, and school completion, which all have a strong social emotional component. Then on page 4 and 5, we thought it was important to, some of the work on page 2 is just kind of reprioritizing some of the language. 4 and 5 are really where we had initially laid out the multi-tiered systems of support. And so we wanted to clarify a few things there, that at the universal programming level I'm on page 4, line 110, that all students have access to classroom experiences and drop-in support available to all students. And then on the next page, in the targeted student support section, emphasizing the importance of parent guardians in their role in consultation about designing targeted student supports. And then the level of intensive supports, beginning at line 131, we've had some more reflection on what services are really at that level so that we can provide a little more detail. That's been further clarified. Wanted to emphasize at line 143, providing parent and guardians with access to the student educational records entitled to them under FERPA. You'll see another update on page 7, again emphasizing the importance of the academic mission of services that support learning and academic achievement. I'm at line 186, school attendance and school completion. And then we were reflecting on the some of the notes about staffing levels. So the level that had been laid out beginning at 209 emphasizes that there's several opportunities to bring staffing design to the attention of the board, and through the budget process, first in the budget proposed by the superintendent, and then in the budget approved by the board. So notice that the revised language says informed by best practices, which is a reference not just to recommended staffing by professional associations, but also strategic best practices. Also, there is the opportunity in the staffing proposed by the superintendent.
Speak up a tiny bit, I'm sorry.
Sorry. I'm at line 217 to 221. How the superintendent can deploy staff in a manner that is effective and equitable. I'm going to stop there and take your comments and questions.
Okay. I don't see any lights on, but I did have one question about line 1, well, section A, 110, on page 4. The removal of specific reference to a single type of social emotional learning programs. I'm assuming that's the crossed out social emotional learning? Oh, you mean no, it's in reference to such as the bullying prevention.
Right, because there are a number of topics addressed, not just bullying. And bullying has its own policy and its own
And we took out social emotional learning and replaced it with mental health literacy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. Ms. Wolf?
I have a little thing, and maybe it's little to me, and it really isn't significant, but they're under review and reporting. It doesn't quite come through. I know that the intent is there, but that what we're doing is depending on the budget and the national best practices. I think what I would do is reverse the order of that and say we will review it with the mind, being mindful of the budget and national best practice. Something that doesn't sound like we're going to actually be able to comply with the national best practices as much as we want to. That's what I get from reading this. Other people may not get that. Likewise with line 217, that paragraph, something that suggests that it really is budget dependent. We're doing the best we can, but it will be budget dependent.
That one I agree with more than the first one.
Well, I said, I'm wordsmithing there, so if you don't change it, I won't follow my sword on it,
So we can reverse that and.
Why don't you all take a look at it?
I was saying,
Yeah.
you're right.
Sure.
For number 2,
Yeah,
most
for-
specifically on 217.
Well, I wanted to start at 209.
Okay.
And go through to 21. That doesn't mean you're going to change every word, but the thoughts are in those lines.
But if we're going to do final action today, it needs to be done here now. So that's why I was
I
saying.
thought we had to move
No.
it to the board and they had an opportunity. Okay.
Well, we do,
Yeah, I
but
know.
we have to do it
The wording.
right, because if we switch it at the full board, then we've got to bring it back
I
again.
got you.
Well, if I understood the comment, if we started the sentence at 210 with "the board will regularly review the staffing capacity," and then work into the sentence, "informed by national best practices through the budget."
And our budget.
Right, right. I think we can do that and bring that forward with you.
And then what
the
about,
other one,
yeah,
Which is,
number 2? For our viewing audience, it reads, because I know we're very popular on TV right now.
Oh, right, right.
Forget Days of Our Lives.
People wordsmithing it.
Yes, I was just going to read the paragraph so that people know what we are looking at. The superintendent of schools shall recommend to the board funding to implement the goals of this policy and strategically deploy professionals in an effect, I'm sorry. That box part is added. Student services should be student service professionals? or student services professionals and their responsibilities in an effective and equitable manner. And we were just going to add something about based on budgetary allowances.
If I reordered it, superintendent of schools, a couple words, implement the goals of this policy and strategically implement the goals
within our budget
What
constraints.
about implementation of this policy is subject to funds available? And, not.
You could do that as a
something-
separate little bullet, actually.
But I don't want people to think that we aren't going to be seriously considering what's needed, and that sort of sounds like, okay,
Right,
Yeah,
that's our
so
out.
I want something that talks about budget, but I want them to know that we are serious
Always
about doing
looking,
as much
right.
as we can in this area. That's why,
Yeah.
I ask, the language reads, the superintendent must recommend to the board funding necessary.
Yeah, but funding necessary, what does, it's.
I think what you're expressing in that specific thing would be that the superintendent could recommend funding, but if we don't have it,
Yeah.
then it's
Then
not.
it goes,
Right.
we can't do
Then we
it.
can't do it.
In other words, the superintendent has to consider the money that we have available, or the money that we think we will have available.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. I was like, I'm not sure how
Turn
that
that
got on.
on.
I have no idea.
Is this place haunted?
Exactly. Absolutely.
So you guys.
Well, I think I understand the sense of what you want it to do. If I could have a little more time after the
Absolutely.
meeting to come up with something, I think we can do this.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. You okay with that?
Yeah, I am.
It'll come so you'll have something when it comes to the full board? Okay.
That's what I thought was happening anyway, that they would look at it.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions or comments, anyone? Then we will, I'll make a motion to move this to the full board for final action. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Great, thank you all very much. Yes, we are. I told you I would try. All right. Move this out of
Make a comment. I just want to comment that on the counseling policy that we just voted to move forward to the full board, that there were a lot of staff and students that gave comments, and just wanted to thank them for being so responsive, right? I didn't want to
I'll second
not
that.
acknowledge that, but yes, and our policy meeting was rescheduled.
Yes.
So,
Hopefully they are still. able
Yes,
to
yes,
notice.
so,
Right,
yeah.
hopefully they were watching, were able to keep up even though it had to be rescheduled.
absolutely.
Hey, I want to second that, and that's why it's important to me that it not sound like we're just saying the budget is the only thing that's
Right.
important, because we heard the student voice on this issue.
Yes. And we definitely wish we could do more. Did you have something, Mr. Sykes?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, in relation to that, too, this was also something the SMOB Advisory Council looked at, and I didn't say much because the policy aligns well with the suggestions given by students, but that's because students were giving suggestions in the official thing. So just highlighting that this was very well done, and I was happy to see all the students that gave feedback, so.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your work. Okay, next up, and almost finally, we are looking at a new policy, GEA, Board Appointment of MCPS Leadership. This is something that, we've been started putting together through working with Human Resources, hopefully with our union leaders. I hadn't seen you before, so I had written a note. Were we collaborative, and do we need to set up follow-up meetings? So this is, it's not the first time that we're taking a look at this, and I know that you added a modified version, so I just want to make sure that we point that out specifically, because my notes are all on the other version. So I will let you all go ahead and take it away.
So in the spirit of collaboration, we received more feedback since the time your previous draft was submitted. And in fact, we have been doing quite a lot of writing. So rather than just trying to talk you through what we were thinking, I wanted you to see it, to see what we were thinking. So those are some discussions we'll go through, but first our presenters will be making their notes.
Thank you, Sally. Joining us now at the table are Ms. April Key, Chief, Office of Human Resources and Development, Dr. Darlene Harris, Executive Director, Office of Human Resources and Development, and Dr. Christine Handy, President of MCPS-MD. This new draft policy responds to the need for updated guidance on board-appointed MCPS leaders. At the board's request, a series of personnel policies and regulations are under review. And as the committee will recall, a second personnel policy, Policy GAA, is also on the committee's work plan and will be discussed in forthcoming meetings. But we will begin our discussion with Policy GEA with Ms. Key.
Good afternoon, committee members. As you may recall, at the committee's October 16 meeting, the committee reviewed a framework for this new policy. Oh, we can move the slide. Thank you. Reviewed a framework for this new policy that proposed a scope of purpose driven by two primary purposes: identify personnel positions subject to board appointment, and establish timelines and criteria for information to be included in any recommendation for board approval. Next slide. As directed by the framework, we engaged practitioner focus groups and a policy writing group to benchmark other school districts. I'll speak more in a moment about the groups providing recommendations for this policy, but at this point, I'd like to invite Dr. Handy to reflect on the writing team's review of benchmarking and themes arising from those discussions. Dr. Handy?
All right. Hello, everybody. Christine Handy, President of MCAP, and I'm thankful that I was invited to participate in this work, so I've been working alongside this committee. So the writing team, we reviewed 11 school districts' policies on the appointment of leaders, as well as the Wallace Foundation. Another task of this group was to collect MCPS's own procedures and practices that have not been set forth in policy or regulation. Next slide. So our review showed that some of these less well-documented MCPS processes were similar to other districts in the following ways. But the team did note that there were topics that would be helpful to document in policy, regulation, or interview protocols. So a key recommendation from benchmarking was that there needed to be an efficient way to fill positions throughout the calendar year with the least impact to our schools, limiting as much as possible filling positions with actings, and ensuring that none of our practices discourage high-quality candidates from applying for leadership positions. So this means establishing processes that will keep the best candidates engaged with communication strategies, more time-efficient interview panel structures, and the opportunity to bring recommendations to the board throughout the calendar year with the least impact on our schools. And so I'm going to pass the baton over to Darlene.
All right. Darlene Harris. It's been a minute. Darlene Harris, Executive Director in the OHRD, and following up on the least impact. With that is hiring year-round. And it's important because it allows MCPS to continuously attract and retain top talent, maintain a competitive edge in the county, and adapt to changing needs. By hiring year-round, we can build a strong staff throughout the system, reduce recruitment costs, and ensure a steady supply of skilled educators and others. Additionally, hiring year-round can help us stay ahead of the competition and respond quickly to staffing demands. So typically, we do hire year-round for certain positions, but we're talking about administrators as well. You've seen that with us starting earlier to hire administrators, principals, but also extending it a little bit where there's, as Dr. Handy says, the least impact. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Key, who will talk about the communities of practice. And if you could turn to the next slide.
I want to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Handy for her participation, and also to thank Dr. Harris for her leadership throughout the process, and the ANS team. Christina and Jason do so much to support this work. The policy writing team was also informed by practitioner stakeholder groups or communities of practice. 4 communities of practice are listed. A 5th task with reviewing investigation processes has recently begun work that flows from the other 4. The draft policies we're discussing today was primarily informed by benchmarking, OHRD's internal analysis of documentation of existing processes, and the recommendations from the promotions community of practice. We received a number of recommendations from the promotions community of practice that you will find in the policy, such as the importance of making the application interview process efficient so that we don't lose excellent candidates because of delays or poor communication. How to address acting positions, both by meeting on a year-round basis to make hiring decisions and establishing a mechanism for transparency with the board about the need for or status of acting positions. Therefore, we found it important to expand the original framework and address the following topics in the draft policy: the vetting structure, their interview structure, and the communication process with the applicants and finalists. As we begin our review of the new draft policy, you will see these adjustments in the purpose section on pages 1 and on the top of 2. I'll point out a few lines. Next slide, please. Oh, you have it in your packet. Sorry about that. Page 1, lines 15 through 17, the desire to encourage applications to leadership positions from candidates of the highest quality, integrity, experience, and commitment to the success of all MCPS students and staff. Lines 24 through 27 highlight the requirement for due diligence in vetting prospective candidates and transparency in information provided to the board. Lines 34 through 37 highlight the importance of effective and informed board decision-making. I'll turn now to Ms. Davis, who will review the rest of the structure of the new policy.
Thank you, Ms. Key, and I believe we are done with the slides. Okay, I'm going to take you to pages 2 and 3 that apply the board commitments in other policies, which are listed at the bottom. These include non-discrimination, equity, and cultural proficiency, the renewing workforce, GAA, which we will be working on, ACF and ACI, which are the student and staff sexual harassment policies, as well as ACH, the workplace bullying policy. Page 3, lines 77 to 79, lays out the positions that are subject to board appointment processes. If we move over to page 4, lines 92 through 104 address filling positions quickly and the processes that will minimize, whenever feasible, filling positions with persons on an acting basis. Lines 101 to 104 provide accountability to the board that any position anticipated to be occupied in an acting capacity for more than 3 months will be discussed with the board. Pages 4 and 5 establish the processes that will keep best candidates engaged with communication strategies, more time efficient interview panel structures, and the opportunity to bring recommendations to the board throughout the calendar year. And we are proposing an amendment, an update at line 144, 145. So it says, so it will read, the superintendent of schools conducts the second panel interview.
That's good. I like that.
Page 6. I do want to note that we are going to update this so finalists is plural. In all cases, it's singular. That was something we'll change. Page 6 describes the vetting processes as well as any, let me see, where am I? Sorry. Where have I gone? Oh, I see, yes. We're discussing materials provided to the board, and if I can take you to page 7, line 188, we've done some adjustment to this language.
Can I just stop you for a minute?
Sure.
Just because we're having this conversation at the policy committee, I do think it's important to at least go under what's under vetting. So just our community can hear that, particularly where it talks about the appropriate investigations that are being done. Can we just outline like 1, 2, and 3, please, if you bear with me?
Sure, sure. So we have laid out the big sections. What we do anticipate doing in regulation is providing more of the procedures for how all these materials get put together. But the information provided to the board about recommended candidates will be reviewed for accuracy, and information will include essential information for effective board decision-making. The qualifications for eligibility have been met. Background checks have been completed, consistent with best practices and available offender registries, including fingerprinting. And in collaboration with the appropriate investigation unit, the finalists have been determined to be clear of any pending or open investigations.
Thank you, because I'm not assuming that everybody is keeping up or trying to keep up. So in the event that they're not, because this is a highly watched committee meeting, and if it's not, but at least people can hear that. So thank you.
Okay,
Ms.
sure.
Davis.
Sure. All right. Transparency of the board shall include providing the following materials about the finalists during the closed session: the resume, cover letter, and any other relevant documentation, including the finalists' qualifications. And then I want to suggest an update at 188 to 192 so that it reads, any concerns or questions raised about interviewees during the appointment committee's deliberations will also be included in the materials brought to the board during closed session.
Can I ask a question about line 183? The resume, cover letter, and any other relevant documentation. What might that include? I mean, I would like to see us be specific about what the board is receiving, because one thing that I would be looking for is the composition of the interview panel.
Mm-hmm. And we currently do that, but it would be good to have it written here in practice, in policy.
Mm-hmm.
We have a list of the things that we currently do, and we can put them in specifically, like the fact sheet, the attestation, those things.
I think it's important for the public to know exactly what information we had available to us. Okay, thank you. Thank you, that was my question.
Well, you know what, so then to Ms. Wolf's point, could we also add the 4 questions that the board is asking, that we ask of the community representatives to ensure that they feel as though the interview panel has gone, that has been handled in a fair way? Right. There, I believe you have those 4 questions, right?
Yes, we've looked at those, and we will finalize those when we have them from Ms. Webb.
Just to be
But
transparent.
we want to make sure we add them into the policy, please. Okay. Let's say.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, just quick question about line 188. So I see you're replacing that the board gets the debrief notes about all the candidates and replacing that with only the concerns of the appointment committee. Am I right in that? Because theoretically, you'd want to hear everything they had to say, not just only concerns. So I was just a little confused about
I
that.
want to hear all of them.
Because it looks like first we were getting a holistic debrief, and now it's just if there are concerns. But I'd want to hear also the positives and negatives. So I'm just kind of confused.
We had asked for, one of the things we had asked for was the notes from the
Exactly.
interview panel. So that would include everything, good, bad, and,
That's why I'm just confused on why it's crossed out.
yeah.
It was
Yeah.
not the intent to limit, it was just trying to wordsmith and get all the, would this work? The debrief notes, including?
Yeah, I like that more. Yeah, so the whole thing, including the concerns, because I want to see more rather than less. Yeah.
Yeah, if you put line 189 right back, and then
Yeah.
underneath, whatever that is, 190, I guess, but then add the rest of it, I think would work.
Yeah, I honestly think put it back and just put everything back and then just including and then your part. I think that makes sense.
I agree.
Yeah.
What happened to the, at one point they talked about an affidavit indicating that all of this had been done. Did we take that out?
That attestation, we'll add it to the list that begins at 183.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think since we told the council that, it's important that they see it in the policy.
Okay, I have a couple things, but I just want to make sure it wasn't changed in the switching of the, okay. Actively, so I may just not be reading this appropriately, but on line 56, actively recruiting and appointing highly qualified leaders with the integrity and experience needed. Shouldn't it read like to create or something?
Yes.
Then on under 2, line 77, page 3. Oh, sorry. Let me make sure it's line 77. Yeah, still line 77. Can we put a definition of what O is? I mean,
Yeah, for anybody looking at it.
right, I was going to say, I mean, I had to ask what O meant.
That's fair. That's fair.
So if we could just define it by, principal or above type of thing, or,
Probably should say, like, because this is referring to the salary schedule.
right.
So it's O level or higher on the salary schedule.
Right, say that.
Okay, but still, if I don't know what O means, what does that do for me?
Well, that's a lot of different positions. It's not just school-based positions. On the O, P, Q of the salary schedule are the ones that are brought to the board for appointment.
Right, but not just school-based, all of them.
Right. So I'm saying, but they're
Oh,
still
so
on
you're
the.
saying you don't want to list them
You
all
would-
specifically?
That would be listing, could be listing hundreds of a lot of jobs on the O, P, and Q
Okay.
salary schedule.
Salary schedules works then, I guess, better.
I
Just
think
the whole
salary
O
schedule
thing,
works
just,
better
I was
than
like, what is
position.
that?
Exactly.
Okay, going further down that page, the last paragraph, number A, you list appointment committees. What about executive directors? Are they allowed to participate? The positions classified O and higher in the MCPS job classification. Superintendent of schools shall establish an appointments committee composed of MCPS leaders of associate superintendent level or above. I don't know if executive directors are above associate,
No, they are not.
so they cannot
The
participate?
directors that supervise principals participate. They give their feedback, but executive directors are not associated with schools in that fashion. So we have directors in there, associate soups in there, the deputy superintendent.
Okay,
Is it possible to actually list out what positions are on an appointments committee?
yeah.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
But so executive directors can sit on the interview panels, they just can't sit on the committee?
They're just not on the appointments
Committee. Got it. Okay.
Are you talking about executive directors or the directors of?
I'm talking about if Brian Hall can't sit in and there's no area superintendent or whatever, can somebody be a person for them.
So
Whatever you call
the
that.
new structure requires that the deputy and the COO be present. There is no option for them not to be.
Oh, okay.
Would we be holding up?
I was just gonna say, what if they're on
appointments, though,
vacation?
if they're on vacation?
No, we have the calendar built out, so they know in advance, and they have to sign the attestation. It's a requirement now, so that's why they participate.
So there can't be a designee, they could be ill.
We don't have a designee at this point. It is specific to the COO and the deputy signing, in addition to me.
I think maybe you should consider whether or not it would be beneficial to put or their designee. Again, just because things seem to happen like that all the time, right? And when it comes to the other side of things, disciplinary actions and things like that, there's frequently a designee for the superintendent to make those decisions. So I just feel like the consistency of it would be.
Okay, we can do that.
Maybe the designee could be appointed by whoever appoints the appointments committee.
Yeah.
You know?
I also know that we discussed at one time, the designee, that the members would appoint another member as their designee for like just one time today, I'm sick today or whatever. It's not me, but whoever the person is. And so they're designating, somebody else who's on that committee because there's a lot of background knowledge, and if you have someone that just, like the ED or somebody that just pops in for today, they don't have the full scope. So that was one idea that was
Think
popular.
about it and
Yeah.
come back with a proposal. How
Yeah,
about
this is
that?
this is just first draft, so. Going forward, number 2 on page 4, so line 101. So I have a significant concern about all of the appointed people. Where did we get the 3 months, for more than 3 months shall be discussed with the board, as opposed to 1 month?
We started with 3 months, not knowing what your preference would be. 1 month is fine with us as well. We just know that acting is problematic, and we wanted to put some guardrails around it.
That's what I'm trying to address.
Yeah,
And
so-
this feels very loose because we don't, like, I would have imagined it would have read the board in closed session with an approval at the board table or something, because we have a lot of acting people, and some of them are multiple, like, for a very long time, and
I think when we were doing this work, we were thinking about short-term versus long-term. Like, I mean, this year, we had a lot of actings that were there for the entire school year.
Correct.
And so we were thinking if they were short-term, that it might not have to come to the board, but certainly more than
less
3
a month is
months.
Short-term. Once they're in there for 4 weeks, isn't there some sort of requirement if they are filling a position as an acting, that it changes their status after 4 weeks? So to me, if that's the activator for that, then it needs to be the activator for us as well.
It's 10 days.
Oh, 10 days. So there you go, 10 days. I mean,
But, so the question I want to ask, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, I did want to ask, like, what do we anticipate the turnaround time would be to interview to get somebody in the position? So for as long as we think that would take, maybe that could be, because I don't think,
Again,
can you find somebody in 10 days?
We're currently at about 30 days.
Right.
30 days-ish. I think, and with the new system, taking out the third interview and having the superintendent holding her own interviews will take out the second appointments. It'll take out additional time that we have now added. It'll be taken away.
Can we suggest 45 days?
That's fine.
'Cause if it's 30, and then we have to give it to you, 45 is a safe.
Yeah.
That's fine.
We still have a time period in
But
which
I do
the
think
board
that we
wants
should
to-
take a look then at that other aspect of the 10 days. No, I mean, doing the closed session and being approved at the table, but I'm talking about looking at how people's pay and positions are affected if they're in a position as acting for more than 10 days.
I would say that would probably be a lot, because even sometimes when someone is out sick, it could, so these could
That's
be
why I'm saying
temporary.
it
So
should be-
that would be a lot of activity coming to the board, because it could just be because somebody is out sick.
No.
And
you're
these aren't like,
misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting that that you bring it to the board if someone's there for 10 days or out 10 days or more. I'm suggesting that whoever the acting is doesn't have their title, their salary, everything else reassigned in a permanent manner for those 45 days.
So I think she's saying that while they're in the active.
you're in a higher level
they get the lower
assignment.
pay. But
you're
you're
in a higher
saying.
level assignment for 10 more days.
No, I agree, you
higher
should
level.
be able to have but isn't it permanent?
No, it's not permanent. It changes once they go back, right? But
That's where I was confused, because I thought it automatically was
No, it's
switched and-
temporary while you're in that position.
'cause I think based on the amount of time the board takes to review it, since we're not trying to do it all at the same time of a board meeting, that's 10 days right there, isn't it? Right? That's not even including the
Right, it's
interview
14 days.
process, right?
Yep,
So I support 45 days though, instead
I
of
do.
3 months. Is
That's
that,
fine.
yeah?
that's fine, 3 months was too long for me. And then adding the approval at the table. And the other thing that I didn't see in here, if someone's being appointed as an acting, are there interviews? Like, do people get to apply, or does the superintendent or staff or somebody just say, we want it to be you? In other words, do we open it up? And if we do, we should put that in here too.
We do not. The chief or associate identifies who will be in the acting position.
Okay. That's something to think
So a
about.
lot of times when you think about in a school, it might just be the assistant principal that moves into that HLA.
Yeah.
And so we don't necessarily need to do full interviews to bring somebody in.
I wasn't
for a
actually
short
thinking
term.
of a full interview. I was thinking more of is there anybody interested in this that, wants to talk to us or something? Just so, I don't know. I don't know why, but just so people have the ability to be appointed if it's something that they're interested in, and the other person who's making the decision may not have thought of. It's just a thought. Yeah.
Just, last comment, and I know, there's a lot of things, we don't want to change. It's like a first draft, but I just want to acknowledge the fantastic work that we're doing by, establishing this, in alignment with the recommendations made by the OIG. I mean, things like expanding board oversight, ensuring timely replacements, all these kinds of things. I just want to reiterate to, of course, our millions of viewers out there that, we are doing good work. And of course, this is a first draft, but, it's a fantastic start, and a lot of these processes are now being strengthened and codified, and I really appreciate that. And looking at this, I feel a lot more confident in our system after a policy like this is introduced, and there's so many fantastic changes here. So I just want to reiterate that, of course, it is, a first draft, so there's going to be some changes, which, we embrace in open arms, but, I mean, this is a fantastic start, and I think that it's really in alignment with all the goals that, the community and the OIG, recommended for us. So I just want to highlight and thank you for your great work in doing that.
I have one last question for you all. At the end, number 3, line 222. What does that currently look like? What are you imagining that will look like? I'm envisioning a spreadsheet of some sort that can just easily be printed. Like for board members who would maybe like to be updated on how many complaints have been called in this month and where are they? Is that something that's going to be easily tracked and traced and shared? Oh, you knocked it off. Oh.
They struck this off.
Wow. Why do we strike that
Yeah,
off?
why did we strike it? Yeah.
Because we do need to do that.
Definitely need to do it.
Right.
The suggestion was that this may be a more appropriate language for regulation, that we can really detail, given how quickly technology can change and how many variations of processes that we can go through. I think regulation might be the place to address this.
And there's an ongoing community of practice that's looking at this whole scope of work. That's why among the reasons we thought we shouldn't put it here, because it's likely that there are going to be changes to policies and regulations that are specific to the whole investigations process.
Okay, so you feel like that's more of the investigations process than the hiring. Okay, I guess that's fair. I just, to your point about things are changing, we frequently hear, well, it's changing, so we can't get that now. Or, you know, we're in this process of putting a new system in place, so we don't have that information right now. And I just don't want to see a lot of that.
Maybe we can save this language.
Okay.
And then when we get to the investigation piece,
Okay.
revisit it and be intentional about saying that this is what we saw when we reviewed the promotion.
Okay, yeah, because I do know that's something the county council is also looking for, is they want to be able to say, tell me how many, you know, whatever's in which schools and how many repeats, and if we don't have a system for that, that's a problem. Ms. Evans? Oh, turn your light on. Sorry.
I was gonna say, it seemed out of place in this policy, that it go more so in an investigations or something like that.
Okay.
But I want to push back on that a minute, just because this is about appointment of leaders, right? So shouldn't there at least be some acknowledgement that there is a way for you to complain if you don't get the job?
That's not what this is.
That would be the HR, but not in the, I don't know.
That actually is not a bad point, though.
But I mean, you're talking about complaints. I could have a complaint because I've been working here 30 years and I didn't get the job. Why wouldn't we want to say that there is some avenue of redress as part of this appointment of leaders policy? I'm open to hearing why not. I mean, you're telling me I now have to go to another policy to find out what I do.
So you're going to make the complaint, and then the investigations DCI department will.
No, it could be EEO, it could be anything. But I'm just saying, shouldn't there be, if it's just a sentence, that there is some avenue and referred to somewhere else? That's
I
what
think
I'm
it could
asking.
do that. It wouldn't be this sentence.
Okay, but I still think it needs to be some kind of reference telling me what I could do in here, or where I should look for that. Thank you.
So mine was more of a comment that I did want to say that prior to the county IG getting back to us on their investigation, which we wholeheartedly appreciate, that because it's such an important process, that there was work that was being done and thought of by our HR department, as well as board colleagues gave input and thoughts and suggestions as to things that we could do to strengthen our appointment process. So I didn't want to leave it that we didn't think to do the work until the IG came back with their investigative report, that there were thoughts around what could be done, what should be done very early on after we went through our
Okay. Anybody have anything else?
process.
Other than the thank yous for your good work, and we're very good system. So thank you all for everything that you have done to put this together so far. Where do we go from here with it?
That's a question.
That is a question, isn't it?
We could take your feedback and
something together that we could take to the full board,
move to the
further
full board
feedback,
for tentative action.
and then put out.
That would leave all of the public comment period for further comment and review, because of course it would come back to this committee
exactly,
after the public comment period.
So I would like to move that we do that. Do I need to repeat it? Okay. All in favor? Okay. You'll send this to the full board as amended.
I will, and I will probably need to work out with board staff timing of board meetings that we can move this through. Okay, all right.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, chugging right along to our final item. We might actually get out of here on time or early. We are now on item number 8, which is it's an item of information. It's the MCPS regulations approved from September 2023 through January 2024. I'm going to ask my colleagues if they have any questions, concerns, or thoughts that they would like to raise before I raise mine. Okay. I just had two questions. Well, one's sort of one's a question, the other one's, we'd gotten a reply back to a question that was brought to the board, it was made by a board member at the, one of the board meetings, I guess, about asking about benchmarking with other LEAs and businesses to see how they handle things and pick the best practices in terms of actually, unfortunately, this is part of the appointments process. I thought it was for something else, but, and they had just written to us that they would be discussing that today, and I didn't see that part, so I just wanted to, but I'll mention it at the full board table, it's fine. My thing is, we get a lot of these in our weekly transmittals, and I'm curious as to why. I mean, these are things that, they're the policies that have already,
The regulation.
the regulation stuff, and I'm just curious why it's not discussed as opposed to sent to us in all these memos, like why we don't just take a section to say, here's the regulatory items. Does anybody have any questions? Let's talk about whatever. Because to me, this just comes to us, and then what are we supposed to do with it?
I think it was a process that was decided upon several years ago. We could revisit it, but that's why we've been doing it, because originally the board was not actually receiving the regulations. So a process was put in place that the board members received copies of the regulations and supporting documentation prior to them being posted for the public. So that was how the process started. Sally and I have been hanging around this policy and regulatory work a long time. But I think that at one point, there was no formal notification to the board.
Changes in regulations.
Of changes to the regulations. And so that was the process that was agreed upon when the question came up. That time, I have no idea how long ago that was.
And I appreciate that, and I stand behind that still, that we should know, but I'm just curious why we don't discuss it at all. I mean, the regulations, there's so many times where we're talking about a policy and we say, we'll put that in the regulations, we'll put that in the regulations. For me, just getting this doesn't really address the thoughts or concerns.
One way to, I'm sorry, Sam.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, one way to possibly address it is when we are doing major policies that are going to have regulations, bring the regulations back to the policy committee.
I thought that's
particularly, well, a long time ago, that's what we did, but that are specifically tied to the policy, the big important policies that you're working on. And so when there are regulatory changes, that might make sense.
And we've done, we have done that throughout time. We don't do it with every policy that we bring, but there are many times, and sometimes we have the framework, the side-by-sides that show. So we've done it in a number of different ways. Sometimes the board has identified a specific regulation. One that comes to mind is FAARA, if I think I'm correct. For example, the facility related policy, regulation for, so we've done it a number of ways at the interest of the board.
Okay, my understanding of us receiving a copy of the regulations was supposed to be at the time of just looking at policies, as opposed to, because like, if I don't save all of this, then I don't even, I'm just trying to be efficient in terms of.
So they aren't always at the same time. Like, for example, the first one, service animals in schools. We're not currently reviewing a policy related to service animals in schools. So if we only brought them tied to policies, I don't know when you would see that one.
Right. I guess I'm thinking more in terms of discussing it at the policy committee.
In addition to, not instead of.
Right.
I think is what she's saying.
Would it be long?
Would it be possible to have a section on a standing section on our agendas that just, either it's tied to a policy, or sometimes they're just big, important regulations, and maybe the change is really small, with like grading and reporting, but that's one that is of tremendous importance. So just taking maybe 10, 15 minutes at each of to like highlight maybe some of the
Similar to the
significant
technical
changes.
Changes, you know,
Yeah.
a policy that has a technical
We
change.
could overview the ones that are sort of in the pipeline or have just
Yeah.
been done since we last met. That would be an upgrade to what we're doing now.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
I just wanted to second that because grading and reporting, I mean, that was a huge change that like appeared in like every student newspaper. Everyone was talking about it. And I had absolutely no idea what had changed. So I think maybe like, and I guess relevant is a loose word, but I mean, we can determine it when relevant changes are made to regulation. We have a moment to discuss it because like, you know, people coming up to me and asking me like I knew, but I didn't because we didn't look over it. So yeah, grading and reporting was a great example because that's the first thing that come to my head. Like I didn't even know what changes were made and it was a huge deal. So maybe just, yeah, having a moment to discuss that, just ask questions and clarification so the board knows relevant regulations that are being changed.
I guess what I would suggest is that we come back to you with a revised suggestion. Part of what we have to respond to is we have it in our policy setting policy that all regulations developed in support of board adopted policies shall be sent to the board as items of information. So I guess we can rethink how you want to receive the information, with what timeline aligned with your policy management committee, do all board members. So why don't we think, and we'll bring it up as a proposal for a better way to do things. As Stephanie said, we inherited some practices that we have been gradually adapting, so.
Yeah, well, when this came in the weekly transmittal, and I was like, now am I supposed to be addressing these during policy committee? Or, so I was just like, I really don't know. So I think that's a great suggestion, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you hearing us on this, so thank you. Anybody have anything else that they would love to share or be excited about here at the policy committee meeting? No? All right. Well, with that then, I will move adjournment, or call for adjournment. Thank you, everybody. Very much appreciate you.